Welcome in, everybody, to yet another episode of Sad Times. My name is Kevin. Appreciate you listening. For those of you who may be listening for the first time, let me just give you a little rundown here. Sad Times is a show where we have a guest on every week who talks about times they were sad, upset, angry, emotional, just having a really difficult time, and how they dealt with it, and also, you know, how those who loved them dealt with it. And I think that the goal, I know that the goal of this show is to allow people to tell their stories so that people out there who might have gone through something similar and think that maybe they are the only ones who had that experience are able to listen and maybe feel less alone. We're not trying to diagnose anything or solve anything. We just want to allow people to tell their stories and hopefully help people feel a little more open and less alone. If you are a longtime listener, you know that we have had a sponsor for a long time, and I am sad to say that I got a call last night, and Fox Cigarettes is no longer sponsoring the program. They have brusquely told me that they are moving on to sponsor some show on the Fox Nation streaming service. So I can't confirm that. That's just what Bill T. Fuck told me. So best of luck to them and their nicotine-infused product. But we do have, we were able to get another sponsor today. Today's show is brought to you by Kevin's New Passport Photo. That's Kevin's New Passport Photo, where youth goes to die. Okay, so that is our sponsor. So let's get to the show. Today we have a former colleague of mine and a good man with a great sweatshirt on. That's the Cubs World Series Championship sweatshirt from 2016, not 1908 or 1907. And his name is Josh. Josh, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being here, man. I wanted to talk about something that you and I were talking about off air just before we came on. And you were telling a story about how I believe it was shortly before you were married, your soon-to-be wife experienced a tragedy. And you kind of told an everyday story about how you supported her, and I think you related it really well. So can you tell us kind of what you did and then kind of the realization you had as you were kind of stepping back from what was going on?
Yeah. So it just so happened that I actually had a work trip. I was in Nashville for a couple of days, and I came home from Nashville and had almost basically just put down my bag when my wife got a call from her brother that their mom had passed away. And we were, on kind of the north side of the city, and she was in the south suburbs. And so obviously everything kind of just stopped, right? Everything just kind of went, into a whole different mode of what the heck is going on, and, what are we doing? And, my wife saying, okay, well, obviously I got to go. And even in that moment, I was like, oh, well, I'm coming with you. And she's like, oh, really? Like she didn't expect it. Like she was like shocked that, we didn't, I didn't have kids at the time. It was just the two of us living together. And she's like, what, she was going to like see her mom's, body essentially at the house.
Jeez,
and she's just like, I'm like, well, you're not driving yourself. Like, why would I let you go by yourself and deal with this? Even if I and I literally went there and sat in the car the entire time for, I don't even know how long, for maybe an hour or hour and a half while the coroner came. And
this is in the house.
So yeah, she was at her own house. So
okay.
the siblings all came, and, were there when the coroner came and, picked up the body, and, and I was just sitting in the car and waiting. But I couldn't have imagined not doing that.
Do you know, and maybe you can't answer this, do you know why she was surprised that you offered to do that?
I just think in her, background, she just didn't have that support normally, and, didn't have, she didn't really know how to handle it. And I think, there was part of her that maybe went into her own personal, like, this is my problem. And, didn't think that like anybody else needed to be involved, or maybe, that kind of like privacy type of thing kicked in of like, this is my private moment. Like, I don't really want anyone else involved,
okay.
But at the same time, she clearly was okay with it. She was just shocked, some reason, a little bit shocked by it. Even the next day when we went to look at, funeral places and a plot, in the cemetery, she was shocked that I wanted to come with that day. Like I called off work and was like, no, I'm coming with you. And she was just like, well, you don't have to do that. I'm like, yeah, I do. Like like, this is like the worst day in your life. Why would I not be as close as I can be to you? And it was a really interesting thing.
It brings up another interesting question, observation that makes me think, of the many things I'm inept at, of which there are many. One of them is relationships. And I've had to learn the hard way that, at least for me, speaking for myself, sometimes, I'm like, oh, I'm going to deal with this problem alone. And then, I've been with a partner and the partner's like, well, I'm here to help too. And I'm like, so I guess I get it, what you're saying. I'm like, okay. I don't know what to do with that, even though that is the nice thing and the loving thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's probably, what it was. And, I just wanted to, be there for whatever she needed and drive her around if that's all it took, and not make her, drive her, it was scary for me to have her driving around with, whatever was going through her head. And,
especially with all the traffic and anything that could happen.
Yeah. I mean, it just wasn't something I was want her to do. And so, so anyways, she went and did some stuff with her family, and, the next day they were doing all the things you got to do when someone passes away suddenly, and didn't, they didn't have a plan for it. They didn't have, the mom hadn't really, done anything to plan for it. And so they were kind of starting fresh, and none of them really knew what to do. It was the first, death in the family, and they didn't really know what to do. And, so they were just kind of figuring it out. And, my wife didn't, want me with her siblings and doing something that was fine. And so I went to a coffee shop, while they were, picking out all these things and making these decisions. And, it definitely, I was in a place of like, this is about the worst day in my life, that like the person I love, parent passed away suddenly and is dealing with this tragedy. Like I was in a very like, different place, just separated from everything else in the world. Right. And I felt like sitting in the coffee shop that like I was my own island of like what I was dealing with. But as I was sitting there and just kind of observing other people come in and out and laugh and joke and smile and kind of, think about it from my perspective of like, I was kind of like, well, why are they laughing? Why are they smiling? Today's a terrible day. But, I kind of was able to realize like, well, they don't know what kind of a terrible day I'm having. And honestly, when I'm doing the same thing they're doing, I'm probably not realizing that other people might be having a terrible day around me too.
Right.
And that you just don't know what's happening in somebody's life, and what just like a smile or a, hey, how you doing? Or, just a gesture or holding a door for somebody, they could be having the worst day of their life, and that might make it better.
Man.
And so that, it was just a really, just a stark realization for me, that I learned in that moment. And, I appreciate that I was able to learn that, through the tragedy, but, it sucks that you have to, have that happen to really learn that starkly.
I think that just, I think that's really, really well said, and really just simple and profound. And, I couldn't agree more, just small kindnesses can go a long way for people. And, I appreciate you sharing that. And I think that's such a good and positive realization that one can get, especially in a time like that, where it's like, what is going on and all this stuff. So I appreciate that. I'm glad that you were able to share that. But you got the Cubs sweatshirt on, and you said that at the time you were living in the north side of the city. You're from the city of Chicago?
Yep. Born and raised, pretty much always in Chicago, like other than 4 years of college in Indiana. So,
So, what did your parents do?
My dad was a Chicago cop
Nice.
my whole life. Spent 30 years on the force, and was able to retire with with his full pension, which is a nice thing for him. He didn't initially want to be a cop. He was actually going to be a youth pastor. when he.
That's quite a jump. Although both, yeah, okay.
Yeah, an interesting combination of things. He actually had gone to California to go to school to be a youth pastor when his dad called and said, "Hey, you got this letter from the Chicago Police Department that says you are accepted to the academy." And him and my mom were married and ended up, going to California and almost immediately turning around and coming back so he could take a job.
And was this before they had any kids?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It was a few years before they had any kids. And so, they had that flexibility. And so my dad came back and got on, the police force. So when I was younger, he was, working a lot of weird hours, right? He'd have to rotate between afternoons and midnights and days. And, I just have stark memories of like us leaving for school and him coming home, or us coming home and needing to be quiet because dad was finally able to go to sleep. And, just come, depending on the different shifts, how, kind of dancing around him when we were younger.
And it's not like he's coming home from a data entry job, right?
Right.
He's coming home from a challenging, emotional, stressful, anything you want to put it.
Yeah.
And then, so you said you have siblings?
Yep. I have an older brother and a younger brother. We're all about a year and a half apart.
Okay. So you would have to kind of tiptoe around. So I do want to ask this because this popped up. Would you be able to tell me if the Police Academy movies are accurate?
I wouldn't. I would say there is definitely a interesting thing about cops in general, but I don't think it gets quite that interesting. But my dad has really long-term friends in the police department, and he still hangs out with now, and they have some really interesting names for each other, nicknames for each other.
No, but not Mahoney or Commandant Lassard.
Usually a little more, actually a little worse.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
But yeah, there's definitely characters. Growing up, my dad was, kind of in and out a lot when I was younger.
Mm-hmm.
And it was stressful, and you don't know when you're a kid how stressful it is for him. But when, there were times where like, we'd spill the milk or something and it felt like the world was ending, and it was probably because he was tired and stressed out. And
I mean, he would get angry.
He'd just get, he'd get angry about, us messing around, and, just eat your cereal and quit messing around. And, it's just, one of the unfortunate, like, bad memories that stuck with me for a long time, and kind of something I'm, trying to learn from as a parent myself is, you just don't know like what moments are going to stick with your kids. And for some reason, there's just this like stark moment of, my father getting angry about spilled milk that is in my head.
Well, did you cry over it?
Probably not.
Okay.
Probably not.
But it's something so to maybe, I don't know, 5-year-old Josh, you're like, what's the big deal, Dad? I just spilled milk. And then did you feel like you disappointed him or you'd done something wrong?
I think it was just, a feeling of, just, that kind of sense of criticism of like, you're just not good enough, or, a little bit of, Dad doesn't, know anything about me other than my mistakes kind of thing. I think that's where it was a tricky transition as he got older. My brothers actually had even more conflict with him than I did in some ways. We all had kind of different conflicts with him, but I think a lot of it was around, just him when, we were younger, him just not being around, and the times he was around, it was usually there seemed to be negativity involved, or, some sort of, discipline involved, or, what are you doing? And, kind of questioning involved. Mm-hmm. And it was probably more just, he was stressed and tired and working crazy hours. But we, to us, it was just like, Dad's not around. And when he is around, he's mad at us.
And so you're kind of tiptoeing around him, even if he's in the room with you.
Right. Exactly. Mm-hmm. And so, I think that led to, certainly some challenges, in high school and stuff with me, it was around sports, with my brothers, it was more around grades and stuff, mm-hmm. where they were scared to like tell him what was going on, or, scared to like, tell the truth. And, it's kind of just because.
When you say they, you mean your brothers were scared?
Yeah.
Like if they said, I got a bad grade, there would be a problem.
Yeah. Hiding report cards, mm-hmm. stuff like that. Right. Cause you just like, I don't want to get yelled at again. Mm-hmm. Right. And, and so, you just gotta, that's what I I feel like is important for me as a parent now is to make sure if I do, something does happen to my kids and I lose my temper, to try to repair that as soon as I can, so that the memory isn't just like Dad yelled at me and walked away, right? Or Dad yelled at me and that's all I don't remember anything else. It's Dad yelled at me, but you know what? Later we hugged and got back together and repaired it, and we had fun afterwards, or we joked afterwards, or I got tickled afterwards, and it wasn't so we know it was a bad thing, but it wasn't a bad thing for the relationship necessarily, right? And so I think that's something I've tried to learn from, is just not letting negative memories stay a negative memory for my kids, and trying to really switch that as much as I can to repair it as soon as possible if something does get in the way.
Yeah, I don't have kids, probably as an edict from God, but I think it's just really refreshing to hear something so thoughtful, because a number of people I'm close to obviously have children, and it just seems to me the most challenging thing. It's the cliche, parenting is the hardest job, et cetera, et cetera. But to hear somebody describe it while also trying to say, well, I'm trying to do better, it's just a really hopeful thing to hear. So that's really awesome to hear.
Yeah, I mean, parenting's you learn a lot from it. It changes you no matter what, and you can either lean into it and learn those lessons and try to do better every day and help your kids, or it's easy to get in a rut of, and I think every parent's gone through it, and I've certainly have probably more times than not of getting discipline being your out card, right? So to say, well, I'm going to put you in your room, or I'm going to either threaten you or give a reward, and use these kind of binary things of either do what I want. If you do what I want, I'll give you a reward. If you don't do what I want, you're going to be punished, or you're not going to get something, or I'm going to take something away from you. Mm-hmm. And honestly, it's so traditional in a sense of how things work, but it's such a damaging thing to your relationship with your kids. And it's actually kind of the easy way out. And I get it, right? Parenting's stressful. And so it's just sometimes you're just would you please stop crying? I will do anything. I will plead, beg, pray. I will give you the world if you would just stop screaming and punching me for a moment. Please, there's no reason why we're doing this. Can you just please stop? Right. And you want to come up with every bribe or threat or whatever. You're just trying to figure, you're going through a dozen different things of I'll give you this. Oh, that didn't work. I'll take this away. Nope, that didn't work. I'll give you this. Yeah. And so it's just a constant, you're just trying to find the thing that's going to work. And unfortunately, the best thing to do is to let them have their tantrum, hold them through it, help them calm down, but sometimes that could take an hour. It's most of our lives, we don't have an hour to let a kid calm down, right? You got to get them to school, you got to get them to daycare, you got to get them to the next place. And, and that's what makes parenting hard is, the challenges of just the time, right? And in order to truly do the right thing for your kid, you can't be on a clock. And as soon as you're on a clock, they know it, and they'll make it harder, right? As soon as they think you're rushing them, or you're pushing them, or you're trying to get them to go somewhere faster than they want to go, good luck.
They'll dig in their heels.
Right. And then you get in a cycle of punishments and rewards, and I'll do this. If you get in the car, you'll get this. If you don't, or if you don't get in the car, this is, and you get away from sometimes there's, you can use, natural consequences hey, well, if you don't get in the car, we're not going to get to swimming. And so you're not going to be able to swim. Mm-hmm. So you can sit here, that's fine, and you can be calm about it and have the natural consequence happen. But to even just threaten, well, we're not going to go to swimming. Then they get in that cycle, and then they learn that cycle, and you can see it. They start to build that habit, and everything becomes more challenging, and so, but you can see too, when you have the time, when you're not on that clock and you're not trying to get somewhere, and you can really spend the time to allow a kid to go through that process and then coach them through how to handle it. or like if you're setting a boundary and say, no, you can't do that. And they're like, heck no, I'm going to scream about this for 2 hours. Well, but if you have the opportunity to let them scream for 2 hours and get through it, they probably aren't going to do it again. Because if you don't give in and they understand that's a boundary and they know how much they're going to use their things against you, they start to go, okay, that's a boundary. I'm okay with that now. And I see that with my kids that those boundaries, will come, in a more peaceful way by letting them go through that process rather than like trying to shortchange it and getting in that cycle of rewards and punishments.
I'm really happy to announce a new podcast from Fourth Hand Media called Profound Parenting with Josh, because damn, that's good stuff, man. And, before we go back to your childhood, one thing I want to say is I love the idea that you're kind of promulgating here that there isn't always a simple solution for these things. It's not a black or a white thing, right? It's not a either or, all that. Now, you mentioned from when your brothers, it was grades, you sports. What was the sport that you were really? Yeah,
so I played baseball, for a very long time. And
what position?
I was a catcher from about 8 years old on.
How are your knees?
So far so good.
Okay, good.
We'll see. That's my concern in about 10 years that I'll be paying the price for that. But so far so good, that I haven't had too many issues, but I loved baseball. I used to sit and watch, Cubs games, before I had to go to school. I could watch day games, the Cubs didn't have lights when I was,
with Harry and Steve.
So every game was during the day almost.
Yes, sir.
And so, I would sit and watch Cubs games and learn. My dad played 6 innings softball, and I would be the kid like behind the backstop actually watching the game while the kids were messing around and running around and causing trouble. And I was actually, for some reason, I wanted to sit behind the backstop and actually see what was happening and learn the game and, just observe. And I've just always kind of been that way of like being able to take something in and focus on it and really observe and see all the pieces and see all the parts. And even at like 5 years old, that was something I would do. And I would just, learn the game from my dad playing softball.
I'm going to take just a real quick moment here to say that it's a beautiful game. And I understand that not everybody loves it, but the way you're describing it and the way that you can just sit back and learn the game by watching it, because so much is going on. And I just want to give a plug to baseball because it needs it. So you're a catcher, and obviously for anybody who the catcher kind of needs to know what's going on. Oh, Jesus. My beautiful chapstick. Needs to know what's going on the field pretty much everywhere, right? So you were an integral part of the team. And so tell us about what it was like. You said you started about 7 or 8. Once you got into high school, like how was that?
So by the time I was 12, I actually, when I was 12 years old, I played 110 baseball games in the summer.
Holy shit.
It's an interesting story. So at 10 and 11, I played on the Park League travel team, and it was, pretty minor travel, just local, tournaments and stuff. Mm-hmm. And then my dad actually got with some other dads at 12 years old, was like, hey, we should, we got some good, our sons are pretty good. We want to give them a bigger opportunity to play travel baseball and do more things. And so some dads got together and started a little travel team called the Diamonds. And so obviously I was Onyx. My dad was part of doing it. Well, it so happened that there was this other team that out of Lake County that was really good, and we played against them, and they always beat us, and they were always winning all these tournaments. And I ended up going to a camp of theirs just to go to a baseball camp at 11 years old. And at the camp, they're like, hey, we like you. We want you to come play for us.
Wow.
And I was
on the team that kept beating you?
Yeah. So,
wow.
So this really good team. And I'm like, well, Dad, I want to play for them. I know you're starting a team for me, but I want to go play for them.
How did he like that?
They're good. I want to go with that team. He told me I had to do both. Basically, he said, "Well, you can do that, but you have to play on the other team as well."
Oh, wow! Okay.
Which was, so that's why I ended up playing about 110 baseball games in a summer, because every day there was a baseball game basically, mm-hmm. And I played on both teams. It was a little challenging because I was really more focused on the better team, and it kind of damaged some, I think, the relationships on the other team, and even my dad with, some of the other dads and stuff. It was a little bit of like, Josh shows up every so often, what the hell, right? Like, why is he getting to play when, my kid's here every day? Or, why is he playing ahead of anybody else? And so like, I didn't really understand that at that age. Like I didn't,
Did it strain between you and your dad at all? Or was he understanding because you were doing both?
Not really. At that time, it really didn't. Okay. They were just driving me around and I didn't care. I just wanted to play baseball. At 12, you're just oblivious and just like, hey, I get to play baseball every day. Great. So, I didn't really, and it didn't really, at 12, it wasn't so concerned with like, the friends and making, everything. And so I didn't really, it didn't bother me that I just show up and play baseball. But I know, like, looking back and hearing some things later that like it did bother people, because I ended up playing as a 13 and 14-year-old with a lot of those kids from that Diamonds team. And there was some strain there that like,
did they feel like you had abandoned them?
Yeah. I think just like, I was just this, I just wasn't there all the time. And so like, who's this guy that just gets to show up when he wants to?
Yeah.
Right. And then we ended up playing on this other travel team together. And I think it led to some things for me where, when I was 14, I was playing on a very good travel team I ended up coaching for 13 years.
Oh, wow.
Out of Niles. And it was, really intense, and we were playing, every day just on a more condensed schedule. So we actually had played about 90 something games, as 14-year-olds. And so we were, it was intense, but like, I didn't have a lot of like friendships on the team. And I think it kind of goes back to that 12-year-old year where a lot of those same kids were now on my team, and they didn't really, we didn't really have a good connection because of some of that history. And so, by the time I was 14, I got to a point where I was almost like, it wasn't, 12-year-old, like, yes, I'm having fun, I'm playing baseball every day. It was more like 14, like, I'm playing baseball every day like a robot, and I can't get away from it for a moment. And it ended up like, and I'm being, more of a teenager and in puberty probably, and hormones and everything else. I got to a point where I got pretty numb, I would say, like, to where.
So it wasn't like, this, I don't care, I get to play baseball every day. Just drive that was gone.
Yeah. And it became just kind of like a numb feeling of, I'm just going through the routine every time. And I wrote poetry at the time, in these notebooks, and I wrote some pretty scary stuff in these notebooks. And there was, a poem that later on my parents saw, because I entered it in some contest or something, and they're like, holy crap, like, we didn't know you were feeling that way.
We didn't know the infield fly rule could be so dark.
Yeah, but I remember, a time when I was 14, we had a day off, and I went to a carnival with some friends.
Yeah,
and I was there with somebody, and I saw this girl that like I had known and liked, and was kind of interested in previously, and I saw her, and when I saw her, I just had no emotion, and that really like struck me. It was like it didn't, I didn't get the butterflies of like seeing this girl that I kind of liked, and I didn't get like anxious even. I didn't get excited. I didn't get, I just didn't feel.
Why do you think that was?
I just had gotten, I think just, but the intensity of playing baseball every day, the emotional ups and downs, the like focus, the just like the maniacal, like baseball focus, everything else. Like I couldn't muster emotion. I just didn't have, I just didn't have a like anything left. I think I just couldn't do it. I don't know. It was really weird. It was just a lack of emotion, like a very numb thing.
And maybe I'm extrapolating a little bit too, based on your earlier comment, like your brother was grades, you was sports, but it seems like, correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like this was becoming more and more of you. This is who you were in a lot of people's eyes, maybe even in your dad's eyes. Like, you're the good baseball player. And that's the way maybe that your dad related to you, or am I kind of off on that?
Yeah, I think to an extent. I mean, it was just, we spent so much time together traveling, and my dad, by the time I was that age, he had a more flexible work schedule and was mostly on days, so he could do a lot of the driving. And my younger brother is actually still a little bitter about the fact that my dad would go to all my baseball games and he would play soccer at the park, and my dad would never go to his soccer games. And
well, I mean, it's soccer.
Yeah, well, exactly.
I'm just kidding.
But my dad wasn't too. It wasn't. But it wasn't. It was kind of a. My dad was interested in it. He liked baseball. So, it wasn't, I think he was a little more, my parents were a little more motivated, but I was playing at a higher level. And so, I needed the support, but I think, it was just so I think we, not at that age yet were we really fighting about it, but there was certainly still a criticism there, or a bit of a, don't screw up mentality. Where, if I, as a catcher, I was very exposed, right? Where, if a ball got by me, it was very obvious, right? And
everybody's looking at you.
Right.
Yep.
And so I just have, some memories of getting in the car after a game being like, why didn't you hustle after that ball? And, why didn't you stop that ball? And you're better than that.
This is your dad?
Yeah.
Okay.
And, and those car rides were just, and something that, later as a coach, I tried to talk to parents about of hey, your kid's putting a lot of energy out on the field and they're going to be exhausted after the game. That's probably not the right time to talk baseball with them. It's probably, that's the time to say, great job. I hope you had fun. Let's go get something to eat.
It's a game.
Right.
Let's go to Dairy Queen.
Right. Exactly. And that's all they care about. 13 and 14, when I was coaching, most of the kids, the game was over, bam, they were in a whole nother world. It was they're focused for the game, last pitches, last out's done. And they're like, hey, where am I going to eat? Where's the ice cream? Where's something else, and it's just something that, I've been able to, try to learn from a little bit, is that experience.
What would you say to your dad when he was kind of giving you a hard time about saying you maybe you weren't hustling enough? Or
I mean, I think I'd kind of be give a whine, kind of a whining no, I wasn't. Yes, I was, or you don't know, or I wouldn't really I think at that time I was pretty intimidated still, and I wouldn't. Okay. By the time I was, going to college, I wasn't so timid about it.
Were you still playing baseball at the time?
Yeah. So I played played in high school and was deciding whether I was going to play in college. And it actually got to the point where it wasn't fun anymore. Because I kind of peaked early, I would say, in a way. I got to my max height as a 14-year-old, and so other people got taller. And so, there's a guy that was a year younger than me in school, but we played in summer together. And at 14 years old, he had never caught a day in his life, been a catcher a day in his life. We played actually Park League together, and the coach said, hey, why don't you try being a catcher? And I basically taught him how to catch. Well, at the time we were probably about the same height, or he was smaller than me. And then by senior year, my senior year of college, his junior year, he was 6'2", and I was still 5'9". And so I ended up, he ended up starting over me by my senior year as a catcher because he was just bigger and stronger.
You said this was in college or
this is high school?
High school.
And kind of the same thing happened to me in college as well. But, in high school, he ended up playing over me because he, had a stronger arm, and, the coach, wanted that. And I ended up hitting, being a DH, playing first base, playing third base. I played wherever I needed to be in the lineup, or, and ended up being the MVP of the team my senior year. But I didn't catch a lot. Which was, different. And my dad, whenever that stuff would happen, my dad would kind of give me a hard time about hey, go talk to the coach. Why aren't you catching? You should be catching. You should be, you should be up there. And it was just that became our real struggle of Dad, leave me alone. I'm dealing with this. Let me take care of it. At one point, I was deciding on colleges, and I could either go to a small school and play baseball, which is where I ended up doing, but
on a scholarship?
No.
But still, you were able to play at the collegiate level.
Yeah.
Okay.
So D3, but I could either do that, or I could go to U of I, where I wasn't going to make the team,
right?
And just be a number. And I had actually decided at one point, I'm going to go to U of I. I don't want this baseball anymore. I don't want to play anymore.
How did your dad take that?
I don't think terrible,
Okay.
but it was an interest, like, but it came out in like an argument, like, you know, and I can't remember exactly how, you know, what started it, but I do remember me just like yelling, like, I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. I don't want to play baseball anymore. I want nothing to, I don't, you know, because we just got to that point, like as a teenager, where we just seemed to be arguing about stuff all the time. And whether it was baseball or even just like, I remember like in 8th grade, like playing basketball, we'd argue after basketball games or, you know, about like what I did. And it was just like, you know, I just had gotten sick of it. And, and I, you know, and it was interesting though, because I had one more thing to do. Like I had a trip to Canada right after I said that. So I was like, I'm done with baseball. I don't want to play baseball anymore, but I'd already signed up for this trip to Canada. But it was, you know, with a bunch of, you know, guys and, you know, my parents weren't coming and I went to Canada and baseball was fun again. You know, now that I'd finally quit.
Now you didn't feel obligated to it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Baseball was fun again. And I was like, wait, I came back from that going, no, I think I want to do this some more. Like I always loved it, right? It wasn't a problem of me loving baseball. It was just like, I was just done with the drama and, you know, and the stress of it. And it was like, wait, I actually do love playing this game. And so I ended up choosing to go to the smaller school. And, you know, I kind of, you know, I've taken away from that. Like, you know, I've tried to in my head sometimes when I'm getting like, you know, a little bit just in a routine or kind of just like, oh, I'm doing the same thing all the time. Or, you know, I've been doing something for a while that I liked at first and now I don't like it anymore. Mm-hmm. I almost do kind of try to do like a mental, you know, like quitting process in my head of like, okay, I'm giving it up. I'm never going to do it again. You know, and think about like, how much would I miss it? You know, how much would that actually impact me? If I actually wanted to stop doing this, like, you know, if I actually said, you know, today's the last day, how much would I miss this?
Wow.
And, you know, in college, obviously after 4 years of college, I did have a last day of playing baseball. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it was a tough day. You know, knowing that it was basically over from a competitive standpoint.
Did you go right into coaching?
So I actually was coaching by the time I ended college. The fall before my senior year, I started helping with the youth team that I played on, the 13 and 14-year-old team I played on. I probably should have been playing baseball, but instead I helped coach baseball.
Are you finding that more fulfilling?
Yeah, I think I was. I mean, I think all along, I actually, as a player, even I enjoyed helping other players get better and teaching them what I knew. Mm-hmm. And you know, I saw an opportunity to go back, and it actually, in a way, hurt my relationship with my college coach my senior year because my 13 and 14-year-old team was really like a college level.
Wow.
Like baseball program in a way, mm-hmm. from like the, you know, advanced level of instruction and how to play the game and signs and things where like my college coach was a former quarterback who was the grad assistant. And then the actual coach who'd been there for 30 years got sick and couldn't coach anymore. And he all of a sudden became the head coach. And so like
it wasn't really his passion.
Yeah, like he was more of a football guy, and he, you know, and so like he didn't know a lot of the details of the game that I knew, and so like, you know, so there were, and you know, philosophies like, but you know, I had a philosophy about hitting and a philosophy about throwing, and like I actually had gone to a coaching conference like in the winter of my senior year. And so like I came back from that conference and my coaches were like teaching things that me and the other, I was with the summer guys from the summer, and we would look at certain guys and go, yeah, that's not how we want to teach that. And then when I went back to college and the coaches were teaching the things where we were saying like, yeah, we that's not how we want to teach that. And they're like doing all those drills. And it was just really frustrating because I was like, yeah, guys, you guys got this wrong. And so I just really had a tough time, you know, feeling, you know, respecting my coaches because I felt like I knew more about the game than they did.
But you know, yeah. Again, the say, you know, catchers make great managers, et cetera, et cetera. But you know, I mentioned at the beginning of the show, we were for a while coworkers at a tech company. You had a pretty high up leadership position. I surely did not. And we worked together there for some time, but I what did you take from coaching into there where you were leading a pretty large team?
Yeah. So, I mean, the thing about when I was finally out of college and coaching, I would basically get a 13-year-old team in the fall. Like we'd have tryouts and get a 13-year-old team, a brand new group of kids. And it was a process to take them from the fall through the winter into the spring. And hopefully by, July, it was a functioning team and a team that, I could sit back and just let them play. And, and they would play as close to a perfect baseball game as possible. Win or lose, they would play the game the right way, and they'd
hit their cutoff man.
Yeah, they wouldn't make mental mistakes. They would, be able to reduce the physical mistakes. Like, they would just know how to play the game the right way. And, that really taught me, going into, other leadership about, how to put people in a position to be successful. One of the things about, especially baseball, is there's so many different roles on the team, but even, all sports really, right? Everyone has a different role. Everyone has different strengths. Everyone has different weaknesses. And, you're not, you have the short, fast kid, right? You're not going to say, hey, go be a home run hitter. It's like, no, here's how you can contribute. You can bunt and beat balls out. You can hit balls on the ground and get on base. Find a way to get on base, steal bases, be a threat. That's your job. Your job is not to hit gappers and hit the ball out of the park, right? And, but you might have a big kid who's slower. It's like, hey, I don't want you on the bases. Get the ball out of the park, right? Like, or I want you driving people in and, and then stay put. Like, don't
Bill
get
James
yourself out.
Loves you.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So you would see that too, and then take that to, when you're leading a team in the office.
and so the same thing happens, when you have a team, in the office. The first team I had was at a bigger company, but I had a small team of like 6 people. And the first thing I did was say, like, well, what do you love to do? What do you love to do? What do you love to do? We have these 6 or 7 very specialized tasks that our team did. And it was like, well, who's going to be the owner of this task? And who's going to be owner of this task? We have to do all these different things, but all of them need an owner. And if I'm the owner, they're not going to be as effective. If each person owns it, they're going to know the problems. They're going to know what needs to be fixed. They're going to know, what to ask for to make the process better. And, and so right from the beginning, it just became a natural thing for me to say, like, who are my players and what can they be good at and what role can they take on? And so, I went from a team of 6 to kind of expanding my reach in that company, to kind of build other teams by proxy to an extent, but kind of build that same mentality of like where is the work going to be in the right place for the right people. But I also saw people lose their jobs over being in the wrong job. Right. And that really,
right person, wrong seat. I
think right. So there was a situation, and this is, I don't want to get all the details. It was going to be a long story, but there was a situation where, there was a project to start click to chat, which if anyone, everyone chats, for support now, but this was when it was brand new. People didn't really do it. And it was like this brand new thing. And I was on the project for click to chat, and these folks who have been doing e-commerce support got put on this click to chat project. Well, that project kind of like never ended. As good corporations do, they put you on a project and then never let you off because they don't know how to off-ramp it into an actual team. And so there was especially one guy who he didn't want to be doing that job. He was doing other stuff before that he liked. Yeah. Everyone said he was doing great. I didn't really know him that well before that. Like, oh yeah, he was great at this and this and this, but they wouldn't let him off of chat. And he ended up just, kind of blowing up a little bit and having some behavioral issues and ended up getting let go because he just didn't like what he was doing and they wouldn't let him stop doing it. And it was just like, it happened a couple of times when I was in a big company like that. And it was just like, man, like how ridiculous and what a waste of talent that we would put somebody in a position, we would take them out of what they're good at, put them in a position to like try to help them grow. But then, maybe they don't grow. Maybe that's just not right for them. It's not where they're going to thrive. So instead of like getting them back to where they can thrive, we're just going to get rid of them and have to hire somebody new.
So I think what you're saying here is, you were taking one approach. So And it sounds like you were running into roadblocks.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was like when I was not the leader, I was observing these things. So when I became the leader, it was really important to me to say like, hey, what's the role somebody's in, and what are their strengths to be good at that role? And if it's not the right role, is there a different role we can put them in? Because I'd rather keep somebody on a team and give them the right thing to be successful at. Because it's amazing, like as a leader, I can have all the ideas in the world, but I'm limited. Right? I only have so many good ideas, and if I'm not doing the work every day, my ideas are only going to be even that much. They're going to be that much worse because I'm not super involved in it. The people doing the work have the best ideas on how to fix it. And, so it's, why would I not like give that power to them to do that and, have, 8 people getting the best ideas for their 8 different things versus me having to come up with all the best ideas myself, which are going to be limited and probably not that good, in each of those 8 areas that I'm not specialized in. And so like, I just really saw, and you see like that a person who really loves a particular thing, whether it's like data or, which, some people hate data, some people love data, right? Or it's training. Some people love training. Some people hate getting involved in training. But you put someone who loves data doing data stuff when that might not have been, like they might have been a support agent. And you're like, but yeah, you could do some analytics stuff. And all of a sudden they come up with reports that you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. Because they love it and they'll tinker with it and try different things and experiment and come up with something where it's like, if I came up with the report, it'd be like, yeah, it's this standard thing. But then like someone who really loves that.
They're putting new filters on it. And you're like, oh, I didn't know I could know that information.
Right. Yeah. They're doing just amazing things. And so that's been my goal as a leader, is to, find for every team member I have to find what they love to do so I can give them things that they can go and be amazing at and do better, and to multiply, by 200% what we would do otherwise if all I was doing was telling them what to do with everything.
Can you talk about what you think the importance of trust and vulnerability is in a leadership position when leading a team?
Yeah, I think in order to get to that place where somebody's strengths, it's a lot of work. Mm-hmm. I've started on new teams a few times now, and you first come in and you have all these. I tend to have all these wonderful ideas, in theory, right? Like, hey, we're going to do this, and we're going to do this, we're going to do this, and everyone goes, yeah, sure, yeah, all right, Josh, yeah, I don't believe you, and every time there seems to be one person, especially, that's like, I don't believe you, and here's all my reasons why. But
on your team?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And, you come in and, they maybe have been there a lot longer, a long time. And they're like, well, you need to tell me, you need to know my job better than I do. Or, I don't think what you're saying is going to work. And so, my way of dealing with this, sit down with them, bring your list, bring your notebook, bring all your questions. I might have answers for some. I might not have answers for others, but we're going to work through it and we're going to talk about it. And I'm going to give you my philosophy on how we're going to do things. And I'm going to share with you why I think that's going to be good for you.
So, yeah. And you mentioned a moment ago, you said, I've had to start with new teams a few times. And you left the company where you and I worked together. Can you tell us about kind of, not the specifics, right? But I know that was a really stressful time for you, and kind of how because I think most people who are listening to this have a job, and most people who are listening to this are like, I wish Josh was my boss. And the question is, how did you balance, you got young kids, you have the stress at the job, like how did you balance that, and how did it all come to a head?
Yeah. So at that job, I had a lot of success in the first, year and a half or so that I was there. And I, had a lot of these tough conversations and built up a team and built trust with the team. And I was, operating, pretty well. And then, I guess I got a little bored. And I said, hey, I'll try something different, and I'll take a different role that's needed in the org. But it's going to put me very close to the boss.
The head of the whole department.
Yeah. And previously I had my team. I was a little bit insulated in that, like, I was allowed to just run my team and I was busy with my team. And so, like, I wasn't getting, I wasn't involved in all day after, minute by minute, operations of the business. And the new role I would be.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a tendency to believe that most work is wasted effort. Like, most things in business are to prove that you are doing something versus actually doing something of value, or to convince your boss that you're doing something, you're not slacking.
It's like most work is that button that they probably still have on the NCAA site when it's the tournament, where you click on a button and then the graph just pops up if your boss walks by, right?
Right.
So I agree with what you're saying a lot, by the way. So sorry to interrupt you. I just made me think of the NCAA. Go ahead, Bruce.
No, well, yeah, I mean, it's, Homer hitting the enter button with the
yeah.
But there's a reason why that we have those, like, those tropes and those, make fun of that, because the reality is everyone knows that a good chunk of their work day, they're not adding value, right? And they're just trying to not get in trouble. And
can you imagine how stressful that is? I mean, we've all felt that. And it's such a cognitive dissonance, right? Where you're trying to do the right thing, but at the same time you're afraid. How did you deal with that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll be honest, I didn't well. At the end of the day, I didn't well. I was very good when I had I had ownership and I could build the culture and the kind of the feedback loops I wanted and be really tight with the people. But once I was kind of the point person for the success of the organization to an extent, underneath my boss, I did not, handle that well, of being told, like, I need you to do this, and this. And I was like, yeah, 9 out of those 10 things are completely pointless. And, it really messed with my head, because I was just. Would
you say that to your boss? Like that blunt?
No, I wouldn't. And that was part of the problem. I think, what responsibility I can take for the situation is I wasn't that clear. I didn't come at it. I would take it. I would go away and be a little more passive aggressive about it and be like, yeah, I'm just not going to do those 9 things, because you know what? Nothing bad's going to happen if I don't, because they're useless. Right. And in my other, other role, I could do that because no one was really paying that close of attention. In this role, he wanted all those 10 things done because it made him feel good about whatever. And if 9 out of 10 weren't done, it was a problem. Whether it actually was a problem or not, it was a problem for him. And so, and so that's where I got, I didn't have the main maturity at that point, to say, like, here's why I don't think any of that is going to be useful. But I think I also had to understand that, like, if I said that, he'd be like, I don't care. This is what I want.
It's going back to trust and vulnerability. Maybe you did not trust that you could be vulnerable in that instance.
Yeah, absolutely not. I mean, there was a point where it got proven to me, where I was working on a software project to say, like, okay, we're going to switch our this huge software we have. And, I went and did research and tried to find the best, solution. And so, people who knew more about it than me were recommending a different solution. And so we got it all approved. It was all ready to go. We were about ready to, like, start acting on it. And I looked at the project plan and I looked how busy we were. And I looked at what resources we had to actually do this thing. And I went to my boss and I said, we shouldn't do it. I said, I know we just did all this work to get to like make this decision, and you went to your boss and had to prove to him, and that was probably, but we shouldn't do this. It's not going to work. We don't have enough people to make it successful. Everyone's too busy to make it successful. We just can't do this kind of a transition successfully, just with the current environment and the people that we have that are already tapped. And he said, we can't do that. I already told my boss we're doing it. We can't not do it.
So I do want to point out here that that's a different reaction than the 9 out of 10 thing. So there was some, far from me to assign it to somebody. It sounds like there was some growth where you felt like you could now be like, okay, I need to be more forthright with you about why I don't think this is a good idea.
Yeah. I mean, I think because it was more of a project, I think, versus like a day-to-day thing. I felt a little more, and I was kind of the owner of it. I felt a little more ownership to be able to, to say, this is not a good idea right now. The end of the story is he said, no, we're doing it anyway. I got let go from the company not too long after, and they wouldn't let him do it. And the feedback I got was that it was pretty rough
All right,
going.
Thanks everybody for tuning in.
So,
well, wait, okay.
Yeah.
That's a lot right there.
Yeah.
Right?
No, so some other things happened. I was put in charge of a team that was kind of dysfunctional. One of the manager who I kind of took over for had actually gone out for an extended period of time for, some issues he was having. When he came back, he, shared with me that there were some mental health issues and some anxiety issues that he was dealing with, probably because he was kind of the wrong person in a role that he thought, he got hired into one role and then got asked to do a bunch of stuff he wasn't good at. And ended up, needing to take a lot of time off to deal with that. And when he came back, he ended up reporting to me and, shared with me what was going on. I told my boss, I think, that he did that because I thought it was no problem. Like, hey, great. Now I understand, we can work together. If he has an issue, I can give him time to get over, to deal with it and come back stronger. And, we can, get, see if he can be effective at the role he was originally hired to do. And I got told that I had broken some sort of rule. I was told, don't ever let your employees tell you medical information. You should just shut them down and tell them I can't listen to you. And then, I ended up being on a PIP, and that was one of the things on my PIP that I, shouldn't ever do again. Basically because what it really was, and I think I can be safe in making, it sounds a little presumptuous, but, they wanted him fired. They didn't think he was good at his job. He was in the way. If he, if we knew something about his medical history, now he's protected. Now it's harder to fire him. So we try to, if I'm trying not to get sued, I try to keep, a big enough distance between me and the employee so that they can't say that I knew something that I, didn't want to know.
And it was anxiety, right? That you were saying that he was struggling with. And well, I mean, let's go into, I don't want to get too far off track, but like so many people in business, whether they're, what somebody would term an anxious person or not, have this roiling anxiety because of, any number of things. And it's just, it would be wonderful if we could have more conversation about that in the workplace and actually have a conversation about it, as opposed to we're having a conversation about mental health, and then say somebody comes to you and says, hey, I'm struggling with this. And you're like,
right. And I just always, again, that trust thing, right? Like I always wanted to build trust and understand what's going on with my team members, because I can't help them if I don't really know what's going on. And part of my job as a leader has been actually breaking down some of those barriers to be like, hey, I need to know, man. Like I can't help you. Like if you're going to put up barriers about how I understand who you are, I can't help you. Good news is I can usually read through them a little bit and poke and prod but show them a better path. But like, part of what I, do as a leader to build that trust, to actually give people opportunity to go into their strength. Because there's plenty of people I've run into that are only limited by what they believe about themselves. Right. And, there was a TED talk I saw recently by a psychiatrist who said, my job is to help people, tell different stories about themselves. And I think as a leader, that's kind of my job, is to help somebody tell a different story about themselves that is better than the one that they came in believing. That if they said like, well, I do this job and that's the only job I'm gonna be good at, I can't be a leader. I can't, get other people to believe me. I'm not good at data. I'm not good at this. Right. And try to figure out like what they are good at so they can tell a different story about what they're great at. Like what, I'm the best in support at this. I'm the best on the team at this, and I own this area. So they can, have a sense of a more, personal, success, versus having that block up to say like, well, I can never have that. And I don't believe in those barriers. I'm maybe a little bit, naive in a way, but like I just think that there's so many barriers that people put up, to themselves. And I do it to myself in a lot of ways too. But, as a leader, I can, see for other people like, hey, you're just don't believe it enough. There was a team lead at the company we worked at who was like the longest term employee at the company. And she was just an agent. And she just did not want to, she was really shy, really introverted, but she knew everything about the business. Mm-hmm. And so just little by little got her to like talk in front of a group and do a huddle and put a presentation together. And so then she grew, and then she became a team lead because she got a little bit more out there and could at least have one-on-one conversations with people and be successful. And as she grew in that, she eventually became a manager. And the only reason that happened, and not to be like pat myself on the back, was just because someone came in and said, "This isn't enough for you. Like you can do so much more." You know so much more. You have a superpower here that no one else has, which is you've been here the longest. You know everything about this business. Why are you not sharing that? Why are you not more, influential and doing more? And I think, I've had that conversation a couple of times, with people, and even, recently, to say like, a lot of times people think that their weaknesses are holding them back, or the things they've gone through in their life are the reason they can't do something. But what I see is the things that you've gone through in your life are actually your superpower, because I haven't gone through those things and I haven't learned the lessons you've learned. And so because you have those lessons, you can do things that nobody else can do. Because you've had maybe a tough childhood, you maybe have a tougher skin and maybe than I do. Right? Because you've had, mental health issues, you can relate to other people on the team that might be going through the same thing, and that I can't. And so that's what I try to look for is like, hey, your story is, as much as you think it's something to hide from, is actually the thing that you can take and make, an impact on other people, because you've gone through it and I haven't. And I can't be a credible person, in a lot of cases because I haven't gone through it, but there's people who have, and they're much more credible to help somebody than I would be, because I don't have that experience. And that's what I look for is like, hey, if I have leaders and stuff, it's like, hey, what's your experience that you're now the credible voice to go and talk to them? I think that's where like diversity is the superpower, right? Like, I think diversity in the workforce is really not understood in a lot of ways. Like we know, like we need to be more diverse. We know we need, different experiences, but we don't go deep enough with it. We think that just like, the surface level, like we're going to put a bunch of different people together is going to be good. But the studies show like putting diverse people together, but not doing the work to integrate is really bad. Like it can be bad for a country. It can be bad for a team. It can be bad for anybody. You don't want diversity without doing the work to integrate your values and understand each other. And so, but the value in diversity is everybody has that perspective that they can bring and be a credible witness and a credible influence about what they've gone through for somebody else that may have gone through something similar. Or, a Black person is going to have a much more, credible voice to another young Black person than I am. Mm-hmm. Right. Like, and that's okay. But I need to bring those people into my circle so that I can make sure that everybody who is part of my circle of influence has somebody that they can feel supported by.
Brent, do you have a printer? I just need to print my resume here. I'm just hoping Josh hires me. In all seriousness, though, a lot of what you said really rings true to me. My most recent boss who I worked for was one of the best leaders I'd ever known. And it's almost like you were just taking words out of his mouth and saying them yourself. It was just really refreshing to hear. And it's kind of what has led me to, I'm trying to become a motivational speaker about anxiety and depression in the workplace. And, a lot of what you're saying, I think, for for my mom and the one other person who listens to this podcast, they're going to be nodding their head and like, yeah. So I just think that's really, really, really insightful and profound stuff. And one thing that I've learned from this conversation is that it seems to me, Josh, that throughout your life, you've had things happen to you. You learn to understand what happened to you, and then you try to take that to make the next experience better. And not just for yourself, but for people around you. And that is something that is extremely admirable. And I think you should pat yourself on the back for that. I'm sorry that I pointed at you. I usually only point at Brent. I just think there's a lot of good to be said here. I really appreciate you sharing all of that with us. With that being said, as a leader, as somebody who, came up and was kind of stuck in something maybe you did or didn't want to do and struggled through things and then did what I tried to describe that you just learned from them, what was the last thing that you would want to say to stick with people, maybe to share with people as, before we kind of close out?
Well, I'd say no situation's permanent. I've gotten fired from a job. I had my second kid on the way. I just bought a house and I got fired from my job. I was out of a job for 8 months.
Oh boy.
But nothing, it wasn't permanent, and I think if you, can base your life on, values and things that are important to you and really stay focused on that, good things will start to come back to you even when it feels like they're all gone.
Mm-hmm.
And, if you base your life on, building trust and, building respect with people and, really like feeling good that you're doing right by people, things will come back around. And it might not always be quick and it might not, be perfect right away. But, I've gone from, being kind of in a big company, being a number, going into a, crazy, tech startup-y kind of thing, getting fired from there. I went to a sports data company, got let go from there, because, it wasn't the right thing for me.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't a place where I could really share my values and really, be a part of a team that was cohesive. And now I'm finally in a place where I feel like I can live as authentically as possible in my work and in my life. And my hope for everybody is they find that someday. And I believe everyone can, but you have to stop and step back and go, this job, whatever job I have that I might not love right now, it's not permanent, but what do I want? What situation is the right situation for me? And how do I make just baby steps to get there? And you know what? If I get fired from this job, maybe that's okay because it wasn't the right thing for me. And I need to go find something a little bit closer to what's going to make me tick and really bring out the best in me. And, I can say that, now at, 40 plus years old, I finally, feel like I'm at a place where I can be my authentic self, at work, and out of work. And I don't have to, put on a mask every time I go into my job to prove that I'm doing my job or that I'm not messing something up and, worrying about getting fired, or like I'm not even adding value, right? Or I'm just a number, right? I actually feel like I can do something important. I can help other people, and fulfill my mission, which is to make work suck less for as many people as I can. And it really is. It actually bothers me that I actually have a small team right now. It's like I'm not impacting as many people as I think I can.
Well, once we get that resume printed, you're gonna have one more.
But I think it's really about, I had a conversation recently with somebody and, I think for everybody, it's important to figure out how you can sit with yourself and be okay with that too. I think you can't really grow until you get back to neutral. I've seen people, where, there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of, they've been burned. They don't want to open up again because someone burned them, or maybe, vulnerability got them fired. I see that limit their, potential, because you have to figure out how to come back from that and get back to center and say, no, I'm going to try that again. And I'm going to try it until it works. Because, I just feel like there's a lot of people just going about their day-to-day life and they can't even sit with themselves for 5 minutes.
Oh yeah.
And that's tragic to me. Like, that's just so tragic to me, because you can't grow until you have at least the comfortability with yourself to sit and know who you are, because you're not going to be able to use your strengths. You're not going to be able to tell somebody else, this is what I'm good at. I can't go in an interview and say, this is what I'm good at. Do you want that? And they'll say yes or no. And if they say yes, great, you probably have the perfect job. Mm-hmm. Right. And until you can do that, it's really hard to find that awesome, situation for yourself.
I'd like to introduce everybody to the new host of Sad Times. His name is Josh. He'll start next week. You're never going to have to hear my bullshit again. In all seriousness, Josh, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing, your story, your thoughts. I think there's just so much value in that. And, it really hits home for me, the idea of sitting with yourself. I, to this day in my 40s, struggle with that all the time. But when I am able to accomplish it, it's a hellscape, but then it's okay, And I just think there's a lot of wisdom in what you said, and I don't want to try to add too much more to it, because I think it really stands on its own really well. So thank you for that, and thank you so much for being on, and go Cubs.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
absolutely.
This was awesome, man. And to everybody at home, something I try to end the show with is a reminder I try to give myself every day. There's always room for kindness and grace in any situation, and especially when it is you sitting with yourself. And I forget that all the time, but I think it's an important thing to remember. And, hopefully, I know that I've taken a lot from this conversation. Hopefully you at home did as well. And, hope you have a great time out there, and let's go Cubs. And we'll see you next time on Sad Times.
You've been listening to a Fourth Hand Joint.